They left her chained to a post in the town square, exposed to the Virginia winter like an animal they wanted gone. Joy Quigley's crime wasn't theft or violence. It was surviving when their children didn't. 3 days she hung there, ice coating her skin like a burial shroud. Now the blizzard would finish what their hatred started. Then the broken blacksmith heard her final prayer.
Hello, compliments of the season. If you love heartwarming stories about life in times past, then you'd enjoy these stories. Comment where you're watching from, like and share these videos with loved ones as you enjoy them. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel too. My team and I have something free and beautiful for you once we hit the 1,000 subscriber mark. It will be shared in the community. You know, we go to great lengths to make these videos, and your support means a lot to us. Therefore, we plan to give back to you once we are able to, so be a part of what we are building.
Before we dive into today's story, let's talk about a dark chapter in American history that many people don't realize extended well beyond the Salem witch trials. In the 1880s, rural communities across America still practiced a disturbing form of frontier justice, scapegoating outsiders when tragedy struck. When diseases swept through towns and doctors had no answers, communities often blamed witches, healers, or simply strangers who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. This wasn't superstition from the 1600s. This was happening while trains crossed the continent and electricity lit up cities. In isolated mountain communities like those in Virginia's Blue Ridge region, medical knowledge was limited. When children died from what we now know were contaminated water sources, mercury poisoning, or tainted medicines, desperate parents needed someone to blame. Women were particularly vulnerable. Traveling seamstresses, midwives, or herbalists could be accused and punished without trial, especially if they had no family to defend them. Punishments ranged from exile to public humiliation, and yes, even being left exposed to the elements, a method that left no obvious blood on the community's hands, but achieved the same deadly result. What makes today's story even chilling? It's based on documented cases where corrupt doctors actually poisoned patients for profit, then deflected blame onto innocent people to cover their crimes. Remember this as you watch. Sometimes the real monsters aren't the ones a frightened community points at, but the ones standing right beside them, wearing respectable faces. Now, let's begin our story.
The winter wind tore through Crozet, Virginia like something with teeth. In the town square, a woman hung against a wooden post, her wrists bound with rope so frozen it had turned black. Joy Quigley had stopped shivering 2 hours ago. That was when the cold finally won, settling so deep into her bones that her body gave up fighting. Ice coated her dress, her hair, her eyelashes. She looked like a statue carved from snow and suffering. 3 days. 3 days since Mayor Dalton Pruitt pointed at her in the church and called her a murderer. 3 days since the fever took his twin daughters, and the town needed someone to blame. Joy was easy, a stranger, a traveling seamstress who arrived last autumn with nothing but her needles and thread. No family, no history, no one to defend her when Dr. Silas Crane stood before the congregation and swore she'd poisoned the creek water. They dragged her into the square that same night, stripped her coat, her shawl, everything warm. Mayor Pruitt tied the knots himself, his face twisted with grief and rage. The crowd shouted words like witch, demon, killer. No trial, no mercy, just rope and winter and the promise that God would judge her fairly. Joy's eyes drifted closed. She thought of her mother, dead 5 years now, wondered if heaven was warm. Her lips moved in silent prayer, though she couldn't feel her mouth anymore. Through the blizzard, a figure emerged, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the heaviness of a man who'd forgotten why he bothered. Greg Talbott pulled his coat tighter and cursed himself for running low on horseshoe iron. He hated coming to town, hated the voices, the memories, the way people looked at him with pity. Then he saw her. At first he thought it was a snow-covered post. Then the wind shifted and he saw her face. Blue lips, frost-white skin. But her chest moved, barely, once. Greg stopped walking. His hand tightened on the sack of supplies. Every instinct screamed at him to keep moving, stay invisible, survive his grief alone. Instead, he dropped the sack and ran toward her. Greg's forge sat 3 miles into the Blue Ridge foothills, hidden where the pine trees grew thick enough to block out the world. Smoke rose from the stone chimney as he kicked the door open, Joy's frozen body cradled in his arms like she weighed nothing. She didn't. Starvation had already started its work before the cold finished the job. He laid her on the floor near the forge fire, the only warm spot in the cabin. Her skin felt like touching ice itself. Greg worked fast, his hands remembering things he'd tried to forget. He stripped away her frozen dress, the fabric cracking like thin glass, and wrapped her in every blanket he owned. The fire roared hotter as he added more wood. Outside, through the small window, 2 wooden crosses stood in the clearing. Clara Talbott, Benjamin Talbott, his wife and son, dead 13 months now from the same fever that took the mayor's daughters. Greg had carved their names himself, his hands shaking so badly the letters came out crooked. He'd found them one morning, cold in their bed. Clara's arms still around Benjamin, like she'd tried to protect him, even as the fever burned them both from the inside. The town doctor, Silas Crane, said there was nothing anyone could have done, said the fever came fast and mean, taking who it wanted. Greg believed him then. He made broth from dried venison, forcing spoonfuls past Joy's blue lips. Her body fought him at first, then slowly, desperately, began to swallow. Hours passed. The blizzard screamed outside. Greg didn't sleep, just kept the fire burning and waited for her to either wake up or stop breathing. On the second day, her eyes opened. Terror flooded her face. She tried to pull away, but her body wouldn't obey. Her hands were wrapped in cloth, 3 fingers on her left hand already turning black from frostbite. "Easy," Greg said, his voice rough from disuse. "You're safe." Joy stared at him, then at the forge, then at her ruined hands. Tears cut tracks down her wind-burned cheeks. Why did you save me?" Greg looked toward the window, toward those 2 crosses. "Because I know what it looks like when a town chooses who dies."
A week passed before Joy could stand without her legs collapsing. Greg amputated 2 of her frostbitten fingers himself, his blacksmith's precision saving the rest. She watched him work the forge during her recovery, the way his hammer fell with perfect rhythm, shaping iron into horseshoes, hinges, and door latches he'd never deliver. "You're skilled," she said one afternoon, her voice still weak. Greg didn't look up. "Used to shoe every horse in 3 counties. That was before your family died." His hammer paused mid-swing. "Marshall told you?" "Didn't have to," Joy replied. "I see it in everything you do. The 2 plates you almost set out, the child's coat hanging by the door." Greg set the hammer down. For a long moment, only the fire crackled between them. Joy told him her story slowly, how she'd traveled to Crozet seeking winter work, how she'd stayed at the boarding house, mending clothes and hemming curtains, how the fever came sudden and vicious, children convulsing in their beds, their skin burning hot enough to blister. "The mayor's daughters died first," she said, "then 3 more children within days. Dr. Crane tried everything, but nothing worked." Greg's jaw tightened. That's exactly how Clara and Benjamin went. Fast, burning, nothing helped. Joy leaned forward. "There's something else. 2 nights before they arrested me, I couldn't sleep. I walked to the creek for water and saw Dr. Crane there. He was throwing bottles into the current, medicine bottles, dark glass. When he saw me, he looked guilty.
told me to mind my business." Greg stood abruptly. "What kind of bottles?" "I don't know, but he was hiding something." "My family drank from that creek," Greg said quietly, "every day." The silence that followed carried the weight of terrible understanding. Joy met his eyes. "We need to know what he threw away." Greg crossed to the window, staring at those two graves. "Then we go to town tonight, and we find out what Silas Crane is hiding." If this story gripped you, subscribe now. Joy and Greg are about to uncover a truth that will shake Crozet to its foundations, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Midnight found them on the edge of Crozet, moving like shadows through back alleys Greg knew from childhood. Dr. Crane's office sat above the apothecary, a single lamp burning in the window. Joy's breath came quick and shallow, fear tightening her chest at being back in the town that condemned her. Greg squeezed her hand once. "Stay close." They circled to the rear, where a wooden staircase led to a back entrance. Greg pulled a thin piece of metal from his coat, worked the lock with the same precision he used shaping iron. The door clicked open. Inside, shelves lined the walls, packed with bottles and jars. The air smelled of alcohol and something else, something sharp and chemical. Greg lit a small lantern while Joy searched Crane's desk. "Here," she whispered, pulling out a leather-bound ledger. Greg held the light closer. The entries made his blood run cold. Cheap industrial alcohol purchased in bulk from Richmond, mercury compounds, arsenic derivatives, all relabeled as legitimate fever medicine. The profit margins were staggering. "He's been poisoning people," Joy breathed, "for money." Greg flipped pages, found correspondence, a supplier in Richmond warning Crane about other incidents in Norfolk and Petersburg, questions from authorities. Crane's response, assuring them Crozet was isolated enough to avoid scrutiny. "He killed them," Greg said, his voice shaking. "He killed Clara, Benjamin, the mayor's daughters, all of them." A floorboard creaked downstairs. They froze. Footsteps on the stairs. The door handle turned. Dr. Silas Crane stepped inside, a pistol in his hand. His eyes widened, seeing them, then narrowed with cold calculation. "I wondered when you'd figure it out. Thought the winter would have finished you, Miss Quigley." Joy backed against the wall. Greg stepped between them. Crane raised the pistol. "That ledger stays here, and so do you, forever." Joy found a glass jar on the shelf. In one fluid motion, she hurled it at the lamp. Glass shattered. Darkness exploded through the room. "Run!" Greg shouted. They crashed through the window as Crane's pistol fired, the bullet splintering wood where Joy's head had been seconds before. Behind them, Crane's voice cut through the night. "You're already dead."
Greg and Joy spent 3 days gathering allies, moving carefully through Crozet's outskirts. The ledger sat hidden beneath Greg's forge floor, their only proof against a man the town trusted. Their first visit was to Martha Kincaid, an elderly midwife who delivered half the children in the county. She opened her door a crack, eyes widening at seeing Joy alive. "They said you'd frozen to death," Martha whispered. "They meant for me to," Joy replied, "but we need your help." Inside, Martha listened as they explained everything. Her wrinkled hands trembled as she examined the ledger entries. "I knew something was wrong," she admitted finally. "Crane's medicine smelled strange, chemical, wrong. But he's the only doctor for 30 miles. Who was I to question?" "You can question now," Greg said, "at the town meeting tomorrow." Martha's fear was clear, but she nodded. Those children deserved better. Others followed. Families who'd lost children whispered their doubts behind closed doors, how the fever came only after taking Crane's medicine, how some children who refused the treatment survived, but fear kept them silent, fear of going against Mayor Pruitt and the respected Dr. Crane. Marshall Boyd Hoskins was their biggest challenge. He'd known Crane for 15 years, trusted him, but his daughter Lucy had barely survived the fever, screaming in agony for 2 days straight. "You're asking me to believe a murderer over my friend?" Hoskins said, his hand resting on his pistol. Greg met his eyes. I'm asking you to look at the evidence. Your daughter drank Crane's medicine. So did mine. One lived, one didn't. Ask yourself why." The marshal stared at the ledger for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "Town meeting's tomorrow at the church. You present this, I'll keep order, but Crane gets to defend himself." "That's all we ask," Joy said. That night, Greg found Joy staring at the church steeple visible through the trees. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "So am I," Greg replied. "But tomorrow, we give those dead children a voice." He took her hand. "They won't touch you while I breathe." The church was packed, every pew filled with faces Joy recognized from her nightmares. The same people who'd screamed for her death now watched her walk down the center aisle beside Greg. Whispers followed like poison. "Witch, murderer, should have stayed dead." Mayor Dalton Pruitt stood at the pulpit, Dr. Silas Crane beside him, both wearing expressions of confident authority. They looked like pillars of the community. Greg and Joy looked like exactly what they were, outsiders demanding justice. "This is highly irregular," Pruitt announced, "but we'll humor these accusations. Proceed, Blacksmith Talbott." Greg opened the ledger, reading entries aloud. Each purchase of industrial alcohol, each bottle of mercury compound labeled as fever remedy, each calculated dose designed to kill slowly while appearing like natural illness. "Lies!" Crane shouted. "Forgeries created by a grief-mad hermit and the woman we justly condemned." Pruitt's voice boomed across the church. "Do we trust our town doctor of 15 years or strangers bearing convenient evidence?" The crowd murmured agreement. Faces hardened. Someone shouted, "Hang her proper this time." Martha Kincaid rose from her pew, her old bones creaking. "I've delivered babies in this town for 40 years. I've trusted Silas Crane with many of them, but his medicine smelled wrong, chemical, like nothing natural could heal." Another voice joined. "My son refused to take the doctor's tonic, fought me on it. He lived. My daughter took it willingly. She died screaming." More stood, a pattern emerging through tears and testimony. Children who took Crane's medicine died. Those who didn't survived. Crane's face flushed red. "This is absurd. I've dedicated my life." His leather bag fell from the pulpit, spilling across the floor. Dozens of dark glass bottles rolled toward the pews, labels promising fever relief, contents reeking of chemicals that had nothing to do with healing. The church fell silent. Then Martha whispered what everyone was thinking. "Dear God, what have you done?" The truth is finally surfacing, but Crane isn't finished. Subscribe now. The next act will leave you breathless.
Marshal Hoskins moved toward Crane, iron shackles ready. "Dr. Silas Crane, you're under arrest for—" Mayor Pruitt lunged sideways, shoving through the crowd toward the door. "This is a conspiracy! All of it!" "Someone stop him!" Hoskins shouted, but Pruitt was already gone, running into the street. 5 minutes later, smoke rose from the apothecary building. "Fire!" someone screamed from outside. "Crane's clinic is burning!" The church emptied in chaos. Joy reached the street first, her heart seizing at the sight. Flames poured from the clinic windows, orange and furious. Then she heard it, a sound that turned her blood to ice. Children screaming inside. "No!" A woman collapsed in the street. "My baby's in there. The nurse was treating him." 3 children trapped behind walls of fire while the town stood frozen in horror. Joy ran. "Joy, no!" Greg's voice cut through the roar, but she was already at the door, kicking it open. Heat slammed into her like a physical wall. Smoke choked her lungs. Behind her, Greg's heavy footsteps followed. "Find them!" he shouted. The first child huddled in the treatment room, crying hysterically. Joy grabbed her, pressed the girl's face into her shoulder, and pushed her toward Greg. "Get her out!" The second child was trapped under a fallen shelf, flames creeping closer. Joy's ruined hand screamed in pain as she lifted the wood. "Come on, sweetheart, move!" Greg returned, grabbed the boy, and disappeared into the smoke again.
The third child was in the back room, frozen in terror as ceiling beams groaned overhead. Joy could barely see through the smoke, her lungs burning, her eyes streaming. "Take my hand," she coughed. "Trust me, please." Tiny fingers gripped hers. Greg appeared with an axe, smashing through the back wall. Fresh air rushed in. They stumbled out into the snow, just as the roof collapsed inward with a roar that shook the ground. Joy fell to her knees, the child safe in her arms, gasping for air that tasted like freedom. The town watched in stunned, shamed silence. Marshal Hoskins found Mayor Pruitt 3 hours later, hiding in a barn outside town. The mayor confessed everything: the partnership with Crane, the split profits, the deliberate cover-up when children started dying. Crane had promised the fever would be blamed on bad water, poor hygiene, anything but the medicine. "We didn't mean for so many to die," Pruitt sobbed as the shackles closed around his wrists. Dr. Crane sat in a cell beside him, his silence more damning than any confession. The town council convened an emergency meeting that same evening. Joy and Greg were summoned to the church, now stripped of its earlier hostility. Faces that screamed for Joy's death couldn't meet her eyes. Council Chairman Robert Finley stood, his voice heavy with shame. "Miss Quigley, we have wronged you terribly. No words can repair what we've done, but we offer this: full pardon, a deed to the Mercer House on Elm Street, a compensation fund of $500, and a position as our town seamstress." He turned to Greg. "Mr. Talbott, we ask you to return as master blacksmith. We've been without proper ironwork since you left. Your forge stands ready." The offers hung in the air, generous, guilt-soaked, desperate. People began approaching with baskets of food, quilts, promises. "We're so sorry. We were afraid. Please forgive us. Please stay." Joy looked at Greg. His jaw was set, his eyes distant. "Crozet took everything from me once. My wife, my son, nearly took my will to live. I won't give this town another chance to break me." Joy stepped forward. "I can accept your apology. I can even forgive you in time, but I won't forget what it felt like to freeze while you watched. Mercy doesn't mean pretending it never happened." She took Greg's hand. "We're leaving." Some faces showed relief, others shame, a few surprising anger that their generosity was rejected. Martha Kincaid pressed a cloth bundle into Joy's hands. "Seeds and herbs for your new beginning, wherever that may be."
Spring arrived in the Blue Ridge Mountains like a whispered promise. Snow melted into rushing creeks. Dogwoods bloomed white and pink against dark pines, and warmth returned to the world. Greg's forge chimney sent steady smoke into clear skies, the rhythm of his hammer ringing through the valley once more. Joy set up her seamstress workspace in the room adjacent to the forge, sunlight streaming through windows Greg had expanded. She'd planted Martha's seeds in neat rows outside, herbs for healing, vegetables for eating, flowers because they were beautiful and she'd survived to see them grow. Greg taught her metalwork on quiet evenings, guiding her scarred hands as she shaped heated iron. She taught him something harder: how to speak about Clara and Benjamin without his voice breaking, how to remember love without drowning in loss. A circuit preacher arrived one April morning, traveling his route through the mountains. He performed the ceremony under open sky, with only deer as witnesses and birdsong as music. Joy Quigley became Joy Talbott with a simple gold band Greg had forged himself, inscribed inside with words only they would see: "Forged in fire." Word spread slowly: a traveler needing horseshoes, a family seeking refuge from a town that had turned cruel, a woman running from a husband's fists. Greg's work gained reputation again, but on his terms: quality over quantity, integrity over profit. Joy's kindness drew the broken ones, the ones who needed more than their clothes mended. She listened, she healed, she offered safety without judgment.
One summer evening, they stood together at Clara and Benjamin's graves, wildflowers now growing around the crosses. "Do you think they'd approve?" Joy asked softly. Greg smiled, something that still felt new on his face. "Clara would say I waited too long to live again. Benjamin would ask if you make good cookies." Joy laughed, the sound bright and unguarded. "I do, actually." They walked back to the forge hand in hand, smoke rising from the chimney like a beacon. Two broken people who'd found each other in winter's cruelest hour. They'd meant for her to die in the cold. Instead, the blizzard forged her into something unbreakable. And in saving her, the broken blacksmith discovered his own redemption. Some things, once broken and reforged, become stronger than they ever were before. Joy in Greg's story proves that even in our darkest winter, hope can survive. If this moved you, subscribe, because everyone deserves a story where the broken become whole again.
If you enjoyed this latest story on life in the Old Wild West, then I'm sure you will love the next one coming up. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you can get updates on time. Did I tell you we post new, exciting, heartwarming stories daily? Subscribe now to join us so you won't miss any new stories.